everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Huck. Today I'm doing a review for Sherwood by Meagan. So this is a standalone YA Robin Hood retelling in which we're following Marian as she takes up the role of being Robin Hood after Robin of Locksley dies in the Crusades. So the way the story starts, the first thing that happens is that we see Robin in the Crusades and he dies. And then the next chapter we go to Marian and follow her as she finds out about his death, and we follow her as she is grieving the loss of Robin. This is taking the version of Robin of Locksley as he is a nobleman, he is the Lord of Locksley, and he and Marian were betrothed. And so we're following Marian as she is grieving, and as part of her grieving process, she kind of accidentally creates this figure of Robin Hood, because before this point there had been Robin of Locksley, the nobleman, but there hadn't been this heroic figure of Robin Hood. And so people think that this person that Marian is depicting is like the ghost of Robin of Locksley come back to protect his people, and she kind of stumbles into this role. So we're following Marian through her grief, but also through her kind of trying to get her bearings and figure out what is she going to do with this like position that she has created for herself as Robin Hood. And I ended up really enjoying this book. Going into it, I wasn't really sure how I was going to feel about it because, one, this book gets some pretty like neutral to negative reviews I found, but also Robin Hood retellings are something that always intrigue me, but can be a little hit or miss. Last year, actually, I read quite a few Robin Hood retellings that didn't work for me, so I wasn't sure what was going to happen with this one, but I really enjoyed this. One of the things that I really liked about this was the way that we got to experience Marian's grieving process with her, because the book starts in, I think, kind of an unusual way for a book like this, that we don't really get a lot of build up into the character of Marian or Robin or their relationship. It really just plunges us immediately into Marian's grief. And so we get to know her character and their relationship through her grieving. And then there are also some little flashbacks that are interspersed throughout the book that do give us some backstory about their relationship and like how they met when they were children and them getting betrothed and like all of these little moments about their relationship. And I think that those served really well to keep you connected to her relationship to Robin. So as she was grieving throughout the book, the reader also still felt connected to him as a character and to their relationship. And some of those flashback scenes were just like killing me. I think they were just used very well in the story. And the book ended up being a lot more sad than I was expecting it to be, because I knew going into it that Robin dies at the beginning, but I just didn't expect to really go through this feeling of grief with Marian in the way that the book does it. And we get to see her kind of like different stages of grieving, and she, for a while she isolates herself. She kind of feels like she's living in a haze. She feels disconnected from life and disconnected from her body. There are times that she does things that are really reckless. As she gets more involved in being Robin Hood, there are times where she forgets that Robin died and then suddenly remembers, and a whole new wave of emotion and guilt just hits her. So I just really liked the way that all of that was done, and I think that's what made me really like emotionally get invested in her character and the story. Eventually in the story there is another romance that develops, and I really liked the romance. It is a romance that I can definitely see other people maybe not liking that much, but I ended up really enjoying it. I do wish that maybe like a little bit more time had been spent on that romance, or a little more time of them together like on page, but I ended up really liking it. And it was actually a romance that I didn't expect to happen, but I had been thinking like, oh, wouldn't it be cool to read a Robin Hood retelling where this romance happened, and then it did, and I was just like, this is perfect. I was just wishing for this. So it worked really well for me. Okay, so I got interrupted, so I don't totally remember what I was saying last, but we're just gonna keep going. So another thing that I really liked about this was how it handled Marian not fitting into traditional gender roles, because we find out that Marian doesn't feel like she fits into traditional feminine gender roles. She doesn't like traditional feminine like pastimes. She doesn't really like embroidery, but she is really into things like riding and archery and fighting. But what I do really like about her is that while she does feel pressure to conform to these gender roles, she doesn't spend a lot of time like feeling bad about herself or disliking herself because she doesn't fit those gender roles, but she also doesn't fall into the not like other girls trope in which she would dislike other women for fitting into those gender roles. So she really isn't disdainful of other women or other women who specifically do follow more traditional feminine gender roles or into more feminine activities. She also involves other women in her plans. She kind of equally tries to dissuade people from getting involved in this like weird situation that she has created for herself. But when people, you know, are determined to help her in her quest of being Robin Hood, she lets women make their own decisions just as much as she lets men make their own decisions. And then once they are involved and helping her in this, in her different plots and schemes, she values their contributions just as much, even if their contributions are different from hers. And so I really liked the way that that was handled, and she really walks this fine line of not being too self-pitying or self-hating, and also not being hateful towards other women. Now, there were a couple of criticisms that I have about this. One is the way that the action scenes were written, because I think that the action scenes would get kind of confusing and would lose track of like who was where and exactly what was happening. So I would often get a little bit confused during the action scenes of the book. I do also feel like the book kind of dragged in the middle, partially because the character in the middle is like floundering a little bit because she's trying to figure out what to do now that she has this new kind of persona and role as Robin Hood, which makes sense, but it also just made the story drag a little bit. The beginning of the book was definitely my favorite part, and I felt the most emotionally engaged, and then at the end it gets much more like exciting as things are all coming together. But that middle section dragged a little bit for me. And then the ending of the book I had some mixed feelings about, because like I had a whole thing about how I wanted it to end, which is not how it ended. But I was fine with the way that it did end. I think that some people may really dislike how it ends. Actually, I know some people really dislike it because I read a bunch of reviews for the book, and a lot of people don't like some of the choices that were made for the end of the book. But I think that the way it ends, while it is not my ideal, it's not the way I wanted it to end, I was fine with it because I think that it makes a lot of sense for this character and her circumstances and her motivations. So I really didn't have a problem with the way that it ended, other than that there were like a couple of details about it that I was like, this seems a little bit unrealistic, but okay, we're just gonna go along with it. But yeah, so overall, I really enjoyed this book and I gave it 4 stars. So that is all for my review of Sherwood by Meagan Spooner. If you've also read this book, let me know what you thought about it. Especially let me know what you thought of the ending, because apparently it's kind of controversial. Or if you haven't read it yet, let me know if you're interested in reading it. Thank you all for watching, and until next time, bye!